So a little more about food laws and regulation. So if we look at the regulatory agencies, the governments, as I earlier said, they would have regulatory bodies or regulatory agencies that would be responsible for enforcing the food laws and regulation, and they would fall into two categories. They would be using inspection and audit of establishment that produce food or handle food or store food, or they are responsible for distribution of food. And it is made sure by these regulatory agencies that all these operations, they follow all the sanitary conditions uh, and the control condition for which they have got set regulations and standards. So they must meet all these standards in every aspect of food production, whether it's handling or storage or selling or processing. Then the second source of information can be obtained from these organizations in the form of audits that are also used by some agencies that enforce HACCP systems. As I said, that food safety system, for example, HACCP system or other systems as well, they heavily rely on documentation and audits. So those audits can also be a source of information for regulatory bodies as well, whether the producer is meeting the standards set by the government or not. And then they can also inspect and analyze food for any harmful components that may be present in the food, and they have to look at whether these harmful substances or hazards, potential hazard which are there in the food, are within the legal framework or within the limits prescribed by these government agencies or not. If they are within limits, there has to be no action. But whenever they exceed those minimum set standards or minimum limits, then the regulatory body has to take certain actions. Similarly, whenever there is a misbranding or or other breach of laws that is observed by these organization or regulatory bodies, whether it is misbranding, mishandling, or whether it's a fraud or any wrongful claims on the food product, or similarly, whenever there's a substance which is harmful and it is found in the food, it has to be determined that whether this substance present in the food, is there any likelihood that this would cause any disease or this would cause any health problem in the consumer. So it has to be determined by this regulatory authority. They have to look at whether this is going to cause any illness or disease or any suffering by the end user if this kind of food is consumed. So when the answer is yes, it means that whenever there's a breach of any law, the government regulatory body would take action. And there could be the severity of that action or the nature of that action would depend upon the degree of breach, the degree of fault that would lie with the manufacturer, the intentions on the manufacturer, as well as the level to which this harmful substance or misbranding is going to cause problems in the society. So they might recall, they might ask the company or the manufacturer to recall the product that they have released into the market, and it must all be recalled back and it must be discarded and it should not remain in the market for sale. This is one of the um, option with the regulatory agency to take this decision. On the other hand, they can also in serious cases, for example, when there is adulteration or a misbranding of food and the negligence lies with the on the part of manufacturer, then they can also take serious actions. These serious actions can be cancellation of license to produce food products. They could be infringements, they could be fines, there could be imprisonment. It all depends upon the level and degree of breach of a law. And these again, as we said, that in regulations they would define the level of punishment that can be given to a manufacturer or a producer or a food handler in case whenever there is a serious threat that can be posed to the end user. So this was a little about food laws and regulation. And as I told you that because there can be serious actions taken against food manufacturers, so it is very important to follow the regulations of set by the country or the regulatory agency or the domain or the region in which the food has to be sold. So they must follow with the rules and regulations, and mostly these are very well defined standards and regulations for every food product that gets into the market. So it has to be followed by the end user, and they have to take care of these regulations while processing, handling, storage, distribution, or every stage of the production of food.